Hello. Right, I'm doing this video in response to a Shadiversity video about nunchucks and how they are crap. Spoiler alert. Um, Shadiversity basically did a whole breakdown of nunchucks and how they are fun, but in a battlefield scenario, worse than useless. And to be perfectly honest, I completely agree. Okay, video over. I have actually thought of a few possible uses for them, and also I just want to play devil's advocate because I do feel it's important to play devil's advocate. And if you don't know what that is, back in the day, the church, the Pope, the position of devil's advocate was actually a legitimate position in the church. And the role of it was basically because whenever they were going around, okay, this person has done these wonderful things, we should declare them a saint. And devil's advocate would come along and say, yeah, but they kick puppies though, so maybe we don't want to put them as a real role model, someone to look up to. And and believe it or not, at some point, the position of devil's advocate was removed from the church because, well, obviously it sounds dodgy. But once they did, the number of saints they appointed went up and up and up and up because there was no one arguing against them. And this sounds really hypocritical of me because I do rather get annoyed at pointless arguments and when you're being argued against just for the sake of being argued against. But that's more for in real life when you've got action you're being held up from action by pointless arguments. In theoretical discussion, it can lead to new knowledge. So, just going forward, I've thought of one scenario where it might prove useful, one where it would be really thematically appropriate, and one where I think it could actually shine. Okay, so the one where it could be useful, basically, is if you have one arm, and say a weak arm. While it is true that the amount of force you can generate is not that great, if you have a weak arm and just the wrist action, you can actually generate, by moving the weight, quite a lot of force per effort put in. So it's a good trade-off, just that and ow. But it's not very big. But then that led me on to, well, who would want to do something with zero effort? And I thought aristocracy. So you could have if you're writing a story, you could have a thematic scenario where you've got some noble twat coming along and he has a nunchuck stuck under his arm and he just wants to be a twat basically. And he could just, oh, little peasant, no. And yeah, that would work thematically. It wouldn't be very effective, but that's the point. There was one scenario, however, I thought where it might excel, and Shad actually led me on to this because he discussed how, look, even if you're bracing with your arm, it's probably not going to break bone, it's not going to cause real damage. And I thought, is there any scenario where you'd be going to a combat scenario and you don't want to cause damage? We've all heard the metaphor of if you judge every animal in the world by how well it can climb a tree, then a fish will continue thinking it's completely useless, despite the fact it can breathe underwater. So in a battlefield scenario, nunchucks, absolute shite. But there's another scenario where it might work well, where you don't want to cause harm. And that led me on to law enforcement. Obviously, this would be in a fantasy setting, not real world, but let's say in a fantasy medieval setting, you have possibly a setting that doesn't have a lot of metal. You could have law enforcement agents with basically nunchucks. The benefit is we have talked about how carters and stuff can look really impressive. Well, guess what? If you've got, say, 3 or 4 drunken people just going at each other, you want to come onto the scene, look impressive, look intimidating, and if necessary, whack them without causing real harm. Because it's not the I'm going to cause you harm until you stop. It's the I'm going to shock you with a bit of pain. It's the taser, basically, of stop it, stop it, stop it. And that could actually lead to de-escalation. So the idea being is for a law enforcement officer to come on, look impressive, and just whack people to make them come to their senses and possibly reconsider what they're doing. Of course, this is against unarmed people. If they started getting out knives and stuff, what you'd probably do is you'd chuck it in their eyes and get something proper. But then I suppose you could also just, if necessary, bring the pieces together and use them like that. Because it could eventually be a truncheon in two parts. So, look impressive, oh, the real fight's happening, truncheon. Which is legitimate, especially if you put a piece of metal on the end. Yeah, so I think that's a scenario where it could actually make sense, because it's an impressive looking weapon that won't actually go around killing people easily. And admittedly, it's one I would never use. I mean, in a modern setting, my choices would be orbital bombardment, bombing run, artillery, tank, sniper rifle. Obviously, in a medieval setting, I'm looking bow and arrow, siege equipment, probably, but realistically, probably shield and spear first and foremost. But yeah, I think that's a food for thought. I mean, occasionally you have these thoughts. I mean, I might do one on the Jog Sprave instant Legolas, because I had some thoughts on there that no one seemed to comment on. So yeah, give a bit of a thought. But I hope you found this food for thought. I've been rambling nowhere rapidly, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you want anything to talk about, do the same. Have a good day.